You were never supposed to find out. That was the first thing my husband said when I walked into our kitchen at 7 in the morning and found a stranger sitting at our table, drinking coffee from my favorite mug. Not I'm sorry, not let me explain, not even my name. You were never supposed to find out. I stood in the doorway in my coat, still holding my keys, still wearing the shoes I had put on 20 minutes earlier to drive to my mother's place. I had forgotten my phone charger there the night before. A small thing. The kind of thing that happens a dozen times a year. The kind of thing that should have taken 15 minutes round trip. Instead, I was standing in my own kitchen, watching a woman I had never seen before, wrap both hands around my mug like she had been doing it for years. He stood up from his chair. She looked at the table. Nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then I set my keys down on the counter quietly, and I said, "Who is she?" We had been married for 8 years, together for 11. We met in university in a second-year economics lecture when he borrowed a pen from me and never gave it back. I used to think that was a cute story. I told it at dinner parties. I told it at our wedding. I have not been able to think about it since, without feeling something heavy settle in my chest. His name is Brennan. We lived in a house in the east end of Ottawa, a red brick semi we bought 6 years ago when the market was still something a regular couple could navigate without an inheritance. We had a dog, a 7-year-old retriever named Biscuit. We had a joint account at TD and a shared Costco membership and a standing Saturday morning routine that involved farmers market bagels and the Globe and Mail crossword. We had plans. Real ones. We had been talking about whether to stay in Ottawa or move to Kingston for more space. We had just started seriously discussing whether we were ready to have a child. I was 34 years old. I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. The signs, looking back, were not subtle. They never are. They only seem invisible when you trust someone completely, when the idea of suspicion feels like a betrayal of your own marriage. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. He started working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays specifically, which struck me as odd, because his office had flex hours, and he had always preferred leaving early. He started being vague about small things, weekend plans, where he'd had lunch. Little gaps in the day that I never used to notice because I never used to look. I told my friend about it once. Maybe 4 months before everything happened. She said, "You're probably just anxious. You two are solid." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. I chose to believe her because the alternative was something I was not ready to look at directly. So I looked away. And then one Sunday night, I drove to my mother's place for dinner and forgot my phone charger on her kitchen counter. And on Monday morning, I drove back to get it before work, and I walked into my own house and found a woman in my kitchen. Her name, I later learned, was Courtney. She was 31. She worked in his building, not in his company, but in the same tower, 3 floors below. They had met in the elevator, but I did not know any of that yet. In the moment, I only knew what I could see. A woman, a mug, my husband standing between us like he was trying to decide which direction to run. "Brennan," I said. "Who is she?" It was not even a question by then. My voice had gone completely flat. Something in me had already understood, even if the rest of me was still catching up. He said her name. He said they worked in the same building. He said it wasn't what I thought. I looked at the overnight bag sitting beside the hallway closet. I looked at the second pair of shoes near the door. A pair of women's sneakers that were not mine. I looked at the way she was sitting, relaxed, barefoot, like she had woken up in this house and walked downstairs and made herself coffee without thinking twice about it. "It's exactly what I think," I said. She stood up then. She said something like, "I should give you two some space." And she picked up her bag and walked past me toward the front door, and she did not look at me once. The door closed. Biscuit, who had been watching all of this from his bed in the corner, put his head down on his paws. Then it was just the two of us. 8 years of marriage standing in a kitchen that suddenly felt like someone else's house. He talked for a long time. I barely heard any of it. There were phrases I caught. "It just happened." And it didn't mean anything at first. And I didn't know how to tell you. Each one landed like something dropped from a height, not because they were original. Because they weren't. Because somewhere in the back of my mind I had always known, if this ever happened, that this is exactly what it would sound like. Ordinary. Almost boring. Nothing like the version you imagine when you are 22 and making promises. I asked how long. He said a few months. I knew immediately that was not true. You don't leave an overnight bag at someone's house after a few months. You don't take a woman's shoes off at the door like you've done it 100 times after a few months, I said. How long, actually? He looked at the floor. Almost 8 months, he said. 8 months. We had celebrated our anniversary in October. I had made reservations at a restaurant in the Glebe that we had been wanting to try for 2 years. We had split a bottle of Niagara Riesling, and he had told me that the past 8 years had been the best of his life. He had been seeing her for 3 of those 8 months at that point. I sat down at the kitchen table. I did not cry. I was surprised by that. I had always assumed that a moment like this would break me open immediately. Instead, I felt a strange, terrible stillness, like the 10 seconds after a car accident when your brain hasn't processed the noise yet. I asked him what he wanted to do. He said he didn't know. That was when something shifted in me. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter than anger and more durable, I said. Okay, I'm going to go to work. We'll talk tonight. He looked almost relieved. Which told me everything I needed to know about how he had been imagining this conversation going. I picked up my keys. I picked up the phone charger I had come back for. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and sat in the driveway for 4 minutes. Then I called my older sister. She answered on the second ring. I need a family lawyer, I said. Today. Not tomorrow. My sister is the kind of person who does not panic. She works in healthcare administration, and she has the steady, organized energy of someone who has spent 15 years managing crises before 9 in the morning. Within an hour, she had texted me the name and number of a lawyer in Centertown who specialized in family law. By lunch, I had an appointment for the following morning. I did not tell Brennan I had made that call. I went to work. I sat at my desk. I answered emails. I ate half a sandwich from the cafe downstairs. I behaved, from the outside, like a person having a perfectly ordinary Monday. Inside, I was making a list. I knew enough to know that the first thing I needed to understand was money. We had a joint account, yes, but we also had separate RRSPs, a joint TFSA, and a mortgage. We had been contributing to the joint TFSA for 4 years. We had a shared investment account at our brokerage. I had been the one managing most of it, actually, because Brennan had always been vague about numbers. He made slightly more than me, but I was the one who tracked the budget, paid the bills on time, filed our taxes together every April. I pulled up our joint accounts on my phone during my lunch break. Everything looked normal. But something made me look closer. There was a transfer I didn't recognize. $800 moved out of the joint checking account 3 weeks earlier to an account I did not have the number for. I scrolled back. There was another one. $1,200. 6 weeks before that. And another one before that. Small enough not to trip an alarm. Large enough to add up. I screenshot everything before I put my phone away. The lawyer's name was Catherine. She was direct, efficient, and the most reassuring person I had spoken to since Monday morning. She had short gray-streaked hair and a yellow legal pad, and she did not once look at me with pity, which I appreciated more than I can say. I told her everything. The affair. The timeline. The transfers. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked me a series of questions I had not expected. Did I have my own credit history separate from his? Did I know where the mortgage documents were? Had we made any large joint purchases in the past year? Did I have access to our tax returns from the past 3 years? I had answers to most of them. For the ones I didn't, she told me exactly what to find and where to look. She explained how property division works in Ontario. She explained the difference between what was legally mine and what I was entitled to as an equal partner in a marriage. She explained what the transfers might mean and how to document them properly. I left her office 2 hours later with a notepad full of her instructions, and something I had not felt since Monday morning: direction. That evening, Brennan was home when I got there. He had made dinner. Pasta, which in 8 years had always been his version of an apology. I sat down across from him and I ate some of it and I let him talk. He said he was sorry. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He said he did not know what he wanted, but that he knew he had hurt me, and he was sorry. I said, I know. He looked at me carefully. I think he was trying to figure out what kind of conversation this was going to be. Whether I was going to cry or rage or beg. Whether this was the part where we tried to fix things. I've been thinking, he said. Maybe we should try counseling. I think we could work through this. I set down my fork. I went to see a lawyer today, I said. The room got very quiet. What? A family lawyer, in Centertown. I have a second appointment next week. He stared at me. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I just said we should talk. I also noticed the transfers, I said. From the joint account. Can you tell me what those were for? The silence that followed was a different kind than the one in the kitchen 2 days earlier. This one had weight to it. Calculation. Those were just. I was moving money around. For a project. What project? He rubbed the back of his neck. It's complicated. I have time. He didn't answer. And that non-answer told me more than anything he could have said. Over the next 2 weeks, the picture got clearer. My lawyer helped me request full disclosure of our joint financial records. What we found was not dramatic, not in the way you see in movies. It was quieter than that, more methodical. He had been moving money slowly, carefully, into a personal account that predated our marriage. Not huge sums. The kind of amounts that wouldn't trigger a conversation. The kind that accumulate into something significant over 8 months. He had also, I learned, consulted a lawyer of his own. The records showed he had met with a family law paralegal 4 months earlier. He had been planning this before I ever found out. Before that morning in the kitchen. Before the conversation at the pasta dinner. The affair was not a mistake that got out of hand. It was a door he had already decided to walk through. He just hadn't told me yet. My own lawyer was measured about it. She said the transfers were recoverable. She said our TFSA contributions were clearly joint assets. She said the mortgage equity would be assessed and divided according to Ontario's equalization process. She walked me through the next steps methodically, like she had done this 1,000 times, which she probably had. I did everything she told me to do. I documented everything. I kept records of every conversation. I took nothing that wasn't mine, and I made sure I had access to everything that was. I also called our bank and spoke to someone about separating our accounts, not in anger. Just practically. 1 phone call, 30 minutes, done. I stayed with my sister for the first 2 weeks. My brother-in-law, to his credit, simply made up the spare room and did not ask a single question. He just put an extra blanket on the bed and left a key on the hook by the front door. Biscuit came with me. That was the one thing I would not negotiate on. Brennan did not argue. The months that followed were not easy, and I will not pretend they were. There were nights at my sister's where I lay awake and replayed specific moments from our marriage, looking for the place where I should have seen it coming, the Tuesday nights. The phone face down on the nightstand. The way he had stopped reaching for my hand in movie theaters at some point. So gradually I hadn't even noticed when it stopped. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from losing something you thought was safe. It's different from losing something you knew was fragile. When a fragile thing breaks, part of you was already bracing. When a safe thing breaks, you question your own ability to read the world. I spent a lot of time questioning myself. My therapist, whom I started seeing in February, was very patient about this. She had an office near the Glebe Market, and she made very good tea, and she had a way of asking questions that made me do the work of answering them myself. By spring, I had my own apartment. A 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a building near the Rideau River, with a small balcony where Biscuit could sit in the sun. I had painted the living room a deep teal that Brennan would have hated. I bought myself a standing lamp I had wanted for 3 years and never gotten because he thought it was too modern. I put it in the corner by the bookshelf. It looked exactly right. The legal process took most of the year. It was not clean or simple. There were weeks when I had to read documents I did not want to read, when I had to sit across a table from him and his lawyer and talk about things like equalization payments and asset disclosure in the flat, procedural language of a legal proceeding. But my lawyer had been thorough. The transfers were accounted for. The TFSS was split correctly. The equity from the house, which had appreciated significantly since we bought it, was calculated properly. In the end, the settlement was fair, not generous on his side. Fair. Exactly as the law intended. I will not pretend money solves anything. It doesn't. But there is something meaningful about having what is yours recognized in writing. With witnesses, there is something that settles in your chest when the process ends and you have not been quietly reduced. A colleague at my office, who had been through her own divorce 5 years before, told me in October that the worst part isn't over when it feels like it should be over. She said, "The real ending comes later quietly, when you realize you have spent 3 days in a row not thinking about him at all." She was right. In November, I noticed I had gone from Tuesday to Friday without once thinking about the pasta dinner, the woman with the mug, the transfers, the paralegal he had visited 4 months before I ever found out. I thought about my lamp. I thought about Biscuit asleep on the rug. I thought about a trip I was planning in the spring, just me and my sister, somewhere west, maybe the Okanagan, maybe further. I thought about how strange it is to feel light. Brennan and I do not talk. We exchanged a few practical emails in the final months of the process. Logistics, paperwork, one brief exchange about a piece of furniture we had bought together at an auction in Perth. He offered it to me. I said he could keep it. That was the last time we communicated. I heard through a mutual friend that things with Courtney did not last past the summer. I do not know if that's true. I do not need it to be true in order to be okay, and I think that might be the clearest sign that I actually am. There are women who have sat exactly where I sat, at kitchen tables in Ottawa and Hamilton and Halifax and Vancouver. In kitchens they helped paint and furniture they helped pick, finding out in the most ordinary way possible that someone they trusted had been building an exit for months while they were still making plans. I know that because the morning after everything happened, I sat in my sister's guest room and typed into a search bar what had happened to me, and I found story after story after story. You are never as alone in it as it feels. What I know now, a year and a half out, is this. The man who had all those quiet months to prepare himself for the end was not prepared for the version of events where I was also prepared. He thought the advantage was his because he knew first. But knowledge without action is just a head start, and I caught up faster than he expected. He thought he was leaving a marriage. He ended up leaving someone who had spent 8 years being a thoughtful, organized, fair partner, and who turned out to be exactly that person when it mattered most. I don't think about the pen he borrowed anymore. I don't tell that story. But I do have a lamp I love, a dog who sleeps at my feet, and an apartment that feels, for the first time in years, exactly like mine. And that is more than enough.